everyone, my name is Tara Milliken, and today we'll be discussing the do's and don'ts of applying to graduate school. This is a presentation sponsored by the BGSU Career Center. First and foremost, let's discuss what this presentation will encompass. We want you to be able to make the determination of whether or not graduate school is the right fit for you at this point in time. We'll also discuss the application process and the required materials depending on which specific type of school you're applying to. I'll go over what you can expect during that application process, deciding factors for both you and the admissions committee, and then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So our first conversation is going to be about whether or not graduate school is the right fit for you right now. For some of you, graduate school might seem like the logical next step in your education, depending on the type of career that you're going to go into. For others, graduate school might be a great fit long-term, but isn't the right step at this point in your career. So this e-card is meant to be funny, but we actually do want you to take it into consideration whether or not you're going into graduate school as a way to avoid seeking full-time employment when you might be perfectly qualified for that. So as we move forward, I'm going to ask that you do a self-assessment. Think about these questions below, and if you can articulate responses that support your decision to go to graduate school, then there's a really good chance that this is the right decision for you. If you're questioning any of these, whether or not that this is a good fit for you, then it might be time to visit a career center or to talk with a mentor or advisor about what is the actual right step for you at this point in your life. So, questions to ask yourself before you apply. What do I really like to do, and what do I excel at? And how can a graduate degree help me accomplish my career goals? Am I motivated to pursue graduate work at this point in time? For some of you, 4 years of your undergraduate degree might be enough to burn you out, and you might want to take a break at first. For others, you might be ready to continue on that track. Do my finances allow for graduate work at this time? Have I done my research about the programs I'm interested in? Have I researched the industry or field in which I hope to complete graduate work? And am I academically and interpersonally prepared to continue my education? Each of these hit at something different, but all of these are important questions to think about when making the decision whether or not to go forward. So remember, graduate school in and of itself is not a career choice, but it's a means to an end. So what we don't want is for you to decide to go to graduate school as a method of avoiding pursuing a full-time career option, because graduate school should be a part of that career decision. Graduate school is and should be a very different experience from your undergraduate career. So rather than just thinking, oh, I really enjoy my undergraduate experience, I think I'll continue on in graduate school, you want those two things to be separate, to be different, and to both be meaningful and rewarding. Next, we'll be talking about the nuts and bolts. So what's included in this application process? Now, it's important to note that every graduate school application process is just a little bit different. And if you're applying to a professional school, like for medicine or for dentistry or ophthalmology, that process is going to look different as well. So we're going to cover in the most basic sense what are the general pieces that are included in a graduate school application. First and foremost, there's general information, which you wouldn't think we would want to talk about, but it's really important to ensure that your contact information is correct, whether it's an online or a paper application. Especially for those of you who are about to graduate, this is crucial. If your contact information is going to change, whether that's a residence, you need to update that information as soon as you know that with the graduate school to which you're applying. Secondly, you want to include transcripts if they're requested, which they most likely will be. Many institutions provide transcripts for free, but there is a formal request process that almost every school has in order for you to have those transcripts sent somewhere else. What makes a transcript official? I could print off an unofficial transcript right now for BGSU, but an official transcript has to come directly from the registrar, and it most often has to be sealed in an envelope and unopened until it reaches its destination. Some institutions have the option of sending those transcripts electronically. It's going to vary based on your institution, but that's something to think about in advance. For those of you who have studied abroad, if you have transcripts from an international institution, this is something that you'll want to prepare for very early on in the process to request those transcripts be sent to the appropriate school. The next most crucial thing for your application process are typically test scores. Now, not every graduate program is going to require a test score. GRE is probably the most common one when we think about graduate school, and that stands for the Graduate Record Exam. Then we have the MCAT, which is for medical school, the GMAT, which is typically seen with business schools, and the LSAT, which is for law school. There might be other additional tests that you are asked to complete in order for your application to be processed. This goes back to the importance of researching an institution and a program before you decide to apply. Another thing to keep in mind is that sometimes applying to the graduate schools can be very expensive, and I'll talk about the application fee and the importance of budgeting in a moment, but specifically in relationship to test scores, it's important to check on how much are these going to cost me as I'm applying to graduate school. That way you can budget appropriately in advance. The next thing that we'll talk about are the letters of recommendation. As mentioned before, every program has different requirements, but how many and from whom do you want to write these letters? These are all things to think about. If a school requires 3 letters of recommendation, you almost certainly want to have one come from someone who can speak to your academic abilities. So whether that's an academic advisor or a faculty member, if they are knowledgeable of the program to which you're applying in the content area, that's even better. So speaking with a professor who you've developed a close relationship with during your time at your undergraduate institution can be really beneficial. Furthermore, you might have a supervisor or an academic advisor or another organizational advisor serve as a reference. So every person's reference list is going to look a little bit different, and the people who they will choose to ask for letters of recommendation from will also vary. It's important to do what works best for you and to find a group of people who can talk broadly about all of your experiences and why you're a good fit for a particular program. When we talk about the most important thing when it comes to asking for letters of recommendation is just that. You have to ask. So reach out to those people because they will most likely be more than willing to help you out, but it's still crucial that you ask them first and then that you provide them with the necessary information in order for them to be successful. If we want people to advocate for us in the application process, it's crucial that we supply them with your current resume, your personal statement, which we'll discuss in just a moment, as well as any dates or deadlines that they need to be aware of as well. So there might also be some other materials that are requested when you apply for a graduate school. If you're applying for a Master's of Fine Arts in English, you might be asked to supply a writing sample, artwork, a portfolio. It can really vary based on which type of programs you're submitting to. But as mentioned before, it's really important that you conduct some form of research on the programs that you're interested in so that you can have these materials prepared well in advance. Now, the thing that everyone tends to get really nervous about is the personal statement. This is something that I find particularly rewarding because this is where you really get to tell your story. I'm going to talk more about the personal statement in just a moment, so I'm going to skip over it for now, but know that this is where you get to sell yourself beyond just the nuts and bolts of your application and your contact information and test scores. So if you haven't already completed a most recent resume, then you'll definitely want to visit a career center in the near future to make sure that that's updated and ready to go as you apply for a program. Tailor that resume to your program or field of interest so that they know that you're serious about completing graduate school. Finally, as mentioned before, there is oftentimes an application fee associated with applying, and it can range anywhere from $30, $40, upwards of $100. And it really just depends on the type of school that you're applying to, the type of program, and any other just outside factors. So it's important to look into this before you decide to submit. Now we're going to go in and break some of these down just a little bit more. So general information. As mentioned before, follow the application instructions. You don't want your application to be tossed out or not reviewed just because you've missed an instruction, so be very diligent about filling this out. Secondly, and most importantly, do not lie on your application. Just like when you're searching for a job, it's crucial that when you apply to a graduate school, you're being honest and authentic because you are all great candidates and we want you to make sure that as you apply for that position in a graduate program, you're representing your most truthful self. Next, only provide telephone numbers and email addresses that you use and check regularly. And beneath that, you'll notice that I also list provide an appropriate email address. So, babycakes24@hotmail.com is not an appropriate email address. Utilizing your BGSU email or another professional email is perfectly acceptable, and that is definitely what we would recommend. Next, like I mentioned before, if your contact information is going to change during the process, be sure to contact the admissions office to ensure that your application materials are all updated as soon as possible. Next, when we talk about transcripts, I've already mentioned the majority of this, but we'll just hit on it one more time. Provide official transcripts for all the schools that you list as having attended. Be aware that there might be fees associated with transcripts request. So while some institutions are happy to provide transcripts for free, other institutions do have a fee that is associated with that request, and it's important that you know about those in advance. Again, if requesting transcripts from international institutions, be aware of potential challenges and the time necessary to fulfill such a request. Test scores. So again, we've hit on a lot of these things, but as I began to mention, confirm what tests the program you're applying to actually require, and if they're willing to offer that information, find out what the average scores of admitted students are so that you have a baseline understanding of what's expected. Different types of programs from different types of fields tend to have a varied list of what their baseline or average scores are for their admitted students. This will help you to make a determination as to whether or not a program is right for you, in part based on whether or not you feel competitive within that admissions pool. It's important to work backwards as you think about your timeline and build in extra time to prepare for the tests, not just to take them, and also to submit them to the programs prior to deadlines. If a program has a December 15th deadline, you probably want to look into first taking the test somewhere around the late summer so that you have time if you need to take the test again, or just to ensure that there's proper time for everything to be submitted with no problems. These are all things that can be looked at on the ets.org website. That is a website that provides information about registration, cost for taking these tests, as well as for the days and how scores are reported. So, letters of recommendation. Again, most graduate programs will require 2 or more letters of recommendation to be submitted on your behalf. We've already discussed who you can ask, but again, it might be faculty, academic advisors, supervisors, or organizational advisors. If you have a strong relationship with someone who you know will advocate for you and that's outside of a direct relationship family-wise, we always recommend that you consider utilizing that person. Ask far in advance and provide all the information necessary for the individual to write a strong letter that will enhance your candidacy. So, if that means that you need to provide them with your resume, your personal statement, and any other information relevant to that particular graduate program, or just sitting down and meeting with them and discussing why you're interested in that program, anything that will help them out is what you want to make sure that you provide to them. Give them a reasonable deadline. You can't ask someone for a letter of recommendation 2 days before it's due. So, let them know far in advance when the deadline is. You might decide to scoot it back a little bit just to ensure that if something happens, they still have those extra grace period days. If you haven't heard from your letter of recommendation writer in a while, you might consider sending a reminder as the deadline approaches. But always be sure to thank them, and a handwritten thank you note is incredibly important for anyone who decides to serve as a recommender, because these are the people who are helping you achieve your academic goals. As mentioned previously, depending on your program, you might be required to submit additional application materials, and these might include writing samples, publications, artwork, portfolio, a thesis. So whether you're applying to graduate school for a master's program, a doctoral program, medical school, or any of the others that we've mentioned before, it's incredibly important that you know, are there other materials that I'm obligated to submit? If additional materials are not required, but you believe you've done something that is relevant, and relevant is really the key word there, that demonstrates your qualifications, you can always ask the admissions committee whether or not it's acceptable to submit that. This might be if you have something on your transcript that doesn't align with where you fit academically or where you think you are now, and you have other information that will demonstrate your academic qualities, that might be an appropriate time to submit that information. And that's just one example of any number that might exist. So, back to our personal statement or statement of purpose. They're often called different things, but these are really interchangeable. Most people want to know, why are these even required? I submit all this other information. Why is it that I have to turn in a personal statement? This is an opportunity for you to make a compelling case for why you should be admitted to a graduate program. So this is you outside of the test scores and the other application materials and even beyond your letter of recommendations. They want to know your story. No two personal statements should ever be the same. Whether you're applying for the same type of program at 6 different institutions, each of those should be a little bit different. Personal statements often have requirements attached to them, which is why that's not really something that I get into in this particular presentation. I've seen personal statements as long as 4 to 5 pages and as short as 500 words. So it's important to look at what you're being required to submit. Write your longest one first, and then you can always downsize and adapt that as needed. As mentioned before, no two personal statements should be the same, but if you're applying to similar programs, a lot of that core information or demonstrations of your values and why you're a good fit might carry over from one institution to another institution's application. Most importantly, be sure to address the questions that are being asked, if they are being asked, and follow the directions. You don't want to write a personal statement that doesn't include the topics or the questions that are being directly asked by the admissions committee. So these are important things to think about, and some of the questions might vary from institution or program to program. Having served on an admissions committee for undergraduate admissions, I believe that these are the things that admissions committees want to know about you, whether you're applying for an undergraduate degree or a graduate or professional school degree. Why are you interested in attending graduate school? What experiences do you have, academic, professional, publications, fellowships, test scores, or even awards that demonstrate your preparedness for graduate school? What do you want to accomplish during your time in graduate school, and what unique perspective do you bring that will serve to enrich the program? What are your postgraduate school goals, and how will this training or academic work assist you in achieving those outcomes? These are big questions, and you're not going to be able to answer them the night before an application's due. And that's why it's so important to begin working on a personal statement early on and really dig deep and think about these sorts of questions, because hopefully you know why and you're able to answer these. Otherwise, it's important to revisit, is graduate school for me at this point in time really the right fit? If you're able to articulate these, though, in a personal statement, typically an admissions committee is going to have a better idea of who you are as a candidate and why you're a good fit for that particular program. Tips and tricks when you think about crafting your personal statement: be direct and be specific. Typically, there's not a whole lot of room and you have a lot of information that you want to share because, as we mentioned, this is your one shot before an interview to tell somebody who you are as a person and why you're a good fit for that program. So when in doubt, make sure that you limit your word choice and that you be as articulate and as succinct as possible so that you can say all of the things that you need to say in that personal statement. Third, accentuate the positive. There might be a time when you were really particularly skilled in an area and you want to accentuate those things. So talk about what you're good at. This isn't a place necessarily to brag, but it is a place to show where you shine and where you are most qualified for the candidacy in that program. On the flip side of that, it's important to address any areas of concern. So if you have a poor grade or two on your academic transcript, you want to address those right out. If your GPA is lower or if you received lower test scores, it's okay if you want to address those immediately rather than just overlooking them entirely, but then return to accentuating the positive characteristics that you still bring to that program. Lastly, be authentic in telling your story. No one is like you, and all of you are interesting and worthwhile candidates to consider for graduate programs. So be authentic and be truthful in telling who you are, because that's really what admissions committees are looking for. And if you're unable to make a clear, compelling case for why you want to attend graduate school, chances are the admissions committee will have a difficult time making that case too. So this isn't supposed to scare you or intimidate you, but it's important that you understand for yourself why this is a good next step. That way you can articulate that clearly to an admissions committee. So now that we've covered all of the application materials and sort of the general process, we can talk about what you might expect during that process. I won't lie, there is a certain level of anxiety when it comes to applying and waiting for admissions decisions. Much of the application process for you happens on the end before you actually submit. A lot of preparation, a lot of writing, and making sure that everything has come together logistically then means a certain level of waiting. So it's important to think about that and be sure to surround yourself with people who are supportive or find the support that you need in order to be okay with that level of anxiety that comes with the application process. Next, think about potential costs when traveling to visit programs or participate in interviews. Some graduate programs might require an interview or an on-campus visit while others do not, but if so, if you're expected to cover that, you'll want to plan that for your budget well in advance. Next, you can expect interview questions that require you to think critically on your academic values and career goals. This is something that as you interview for programs or when you speak with faculty members or program chairs, you want to be asked to critically reflect because you want to find a program that's going to challenge you and help you grow as a professional. Again, graduate school is not the ultimate goal here. These graduate programs are what will help you achieve long-term career goals. Now, everyone sort of laughs about this, but it's true. You will experience a certain level of information overload. It's unavoidable simply because there's a lot of information that you're being asked to take on as you're applying to programs, whether that's through email or through phone call or during interviews. Have a system that works best for you to categorize that information, and if you're not unable to process it all at that point in time, revisit it later when you're in a better place to do so. Next, warm and genuine faculty members. You want to make that connection with your faculty members because while you might not have been as close to faculty during your time as an undergraduate student, graduate programs are the ideal opportunity to build relationships with faculty members to really ensure that you find mentors or people who will advocate for you in the professional field after you've completed your program. And lastly, excitement, maybe a little bit of nervousness, but hopefully mostly excitement for the future because this is an exciting next step for you. This is something that you know that you're confident that you want to go into, and so graduate school should bring with it a certain level of excitement for the future. Deciding factors. So we can laugh about this because at Bowling Green, clearly the weather here is not why I chose this program for graduate school. And it really shouldn't be that decision-making process, but there are other important deciding factors. So when you consider, both when applying and when accepting, the academic rigor curriculum. If academic rigor is an important component of your graduate school application process, then you want to make sure that you're choosing institutions that really align with those values. So secondly, a good way to look at that is what type of a reputation do they have within the industry or field? Do people know about graduates from that particular program? Is this an industry that tends to pull graduates from that program because it's so well known? These are things to think about. Ask mentors in your undergraduate institutions or ask peers in the industry that you're interested in. Have you heard anything about this particular graduate program? Do you have anyone that you could connect me with about this graduate program? Next, if you are interested in conducting research or want to partnership with faculty, these are things to ask when you start to consider which applications to submit to different programs. If you are very interested in a specific type of research, if a faculty member is well known in that area, that probably means that it's a good fit for you. On the flip side of that, if research really isn't your thing, that's something to know too, and to perhaps find a program that is focused less on research and more on another area of that academic discipline. Additional factors might include location. So do you want to be in a city? Do you want to be out in the country? Institution type. Public, private, does it matter to you? Are these things that will influence your decision? Institution size. Do you want to be at a mid-sized public like Bowling Green State University? Do you want to go to a large research institution like Ohio State or a small private school? Then experiential and cost-defraying opportunities. These come in many forms, whether it's scholarships, fellowships, or assistantships. Now, if you're not sure of the difference between these, scholarships tend to be awarded money that you aren't obligated to pay back. Oftentimes, these are given for academic merit or for another specific reason. Fellowships are also awards that many graduate programs offer and something that you should certainly inquire into as you apply to programs. Assistantships are something that you typically work a certain number of hours per week, and in response to that, the program or the office in which you work will cover a portion or all of your tuition or graduate school fees. Many institutions have these options too, but it's important to reach out early because assistantships do tend to fill up rather quickly. So on that same note, cost. If cost is of no consequence to you, then that might not be a huge deciding factor or a decision to consider as you apply or accept a position. However, if it is, if you have undergraduate student loans, or if this is something that's definitely on your mind, you want to be wary of that as you apply to different programs. And then fit. Fit's kind of that magical X factor, and we see it a lot when students look for an undergraduate institution where they have that moment of, oh, I could definitely see myself here. We hope that you have that as you're searching for graduate school too. If you can't visit the campus, we hope that you're able to connect with people there, or that you're able to speak with people on the phone or faculty, whatever the case might be, so that you know this is a place where I belong and where I can really thrive as both an academic and as a professional in my field. As we're wrapping up, we're going to think about final thoughts. So graduate school applications can be stressful, but in order to maximize your options, you can apply to multiple programs. Then think about a timeline. Develop this early, make it yours, make it personal, and stick to it. I like to recommend working backwards from the deadlines of your programs that you've decided to apply to. And this includes everything from test scores to asking for letters of recommendation, to submitting your personal statements, to having people review your personal statements or your resumes. So develop that timeline that works best for you, keeping into consideration other factors that might influence that, whether it's holidays or family vacations. These are all things that can influence a graduate school application process, and there's something to keep in mind. Proofread all of your application materials. We see this often in the Career Center where students find typos in their resumes after they've submitted them somewhere, but the same can be the case for application materials for graduate school, and that's not something that you want to run into. Not only should you be proofreading your documents, have your peers proofread your documents, ask academic advisors or other people who you trust to review that with a careful eye and to ensure that that information is all accurate, that there are no grammatical or other errors in your writing. Even after you've been accepted to the program of your choice, continue to think carefully about your career goals and aspirations and how best to achieve them. So this program is really targeted specifically on how to apply to graduate school and what that process entails. But the exciting thing is that this is only the beginning. After you've been accepted, or you've decided to attend an institution, that's where the excitement starts, and that's where you really get to think about how can this program best benefit me and how can I contribute to the program. While this can be a really stressful process, it should also be a little bit of fun. As I mentioned before, this is just the start, and if you're confident in your ability to go to graduate school and complete that academic work, then you're bound to be a better professional at the conclusion of that particular program. So this concludes my formal presentation, but if you do still have some questions, I would be happy to answer them. Our staff members can be contacted here at the Career Center in 318C Math Science Building, or you can look us up on hire.bgsu.edu, or by calling 419-372-2356. Our website has a lot of great resources related to applying to graduate school that I would highly recommend you check out, whether it's something from personal statements or how to prepare for tests. We have an entire book dedicated to that just for our students here at the university. Additionally, BGSU has an office of pre-professional programs located in 101 University Hall. So whether you're interested in veterinary science, pre-med, dentistry, or any of the other professional type programs that undergraduates often go into, this is an office that will help you immensely in that process. Their number is 419-372-0498. Again, while this concludes our presentation, we are happy to help you in any step along the way to your graduate school process, and we wish you the best of luck during that time. Thank you.